Ko hikurangi te manga, ko waipu te awa, ko horauta te waka, ko Ngāti Porauta, ta ngā hauiti a ngā iwi, ko hautapu Baker Wau. And I'm the Vision Mātauranga Māori Knowledge Broker for the Resilience to Nature's Challenge National Science Challenge. And it is my privilege to have a kōrero today with Captain Ernesto Ojeda. So for those of you that may not know, the Resilience to Nature's Challenge, kia manawa roa ngā kina o te Aotearoa, is one of 11 national science challenges funded to tackle some of the big science challenges and questions for Aotearoa New Zealand. Hosted by GNS Science, our purpose is to accelerate Aotearoa's New Zealand's resilience to, but more importantly, relationship with our ever-changing taiao through innovative collaborative research. We bring together deep partnerships, transformative research, and mātauranga Māori to provide the new knowledge, tools, and ways to working that will help grow our resilience and relationship to our taiao. So in collaboration with Te Tira Whakamataki, we are excited to present He Kaikei Aku Ringa, a discussion on disaster preparedness, particularly for whānau and communities. So this whakatauki, He Kaikei Aku Ringa, translates to there is food at the end of my hands, and speaks to resilience, empowerment, and hope. The whakatauki refers to one's ability to have and use the necessary skills, knowledge, and resources to be resilient and thrive. So as we know, natural hazards and climate change pose a significant threat to the well-being of whānau and communities across the motu, and the need to prepare for such events is paramount. The purpose of this webinar or this discussion today is to present whānau and communities with tangible and practical knowledge so they can determine for themselves how best to prepare, respond, and recover. And today we are very, very privileged to host who basically is the Yoda of disaster preparedness, Captain Ernesto Ojeda of the Indigenous Tarumara and Yaqui Nations. With over 50 years experience in disaster preparedness and response, Captain Ojeda is often referred to as the godfather of urban search and rescue, having written most of the manuals and trainings for the USA, UN, and many other countries, including our own. He currently teaches American Indian Studies at Cal State University, Long Beach as well. He is going to introduce himself very shortly and tell us a bit more about who he is. But before he does that, here's kind of how today's going to work. We'll start with introductions, go into a series of partai that we've already put together on our end, perhaps followed by a short intermission, chance for you to fill up your cup of tea, go for a stretch, bit of a hikoi, and then we'll come back with Q&A. On Q&A, you'll see at the top right-hand corner of your screen, that Q&A function. You can just click on that. The option is there for you as well to provide a partai anonymously or not, but chuck your partai on there. We also have some awesome people in the background navigating that too. So come our Q&A time, we can try our best to answer every partai that is presented. I know this might sound a bit cliche in this context, but genuinely this is a safe space and no question is a dumb question. Today is an opportunity for us to wānanga, to sit and glean off the amazing mātauranga that our papa here has. So please ask any partai that you have in and around this particular kaupapa, or any kaupapa for that matter. And yeah, we'll crack into it, shall we? So without further ado, e te iwi, are taringa mai. So to you, e te papa, thank you so much for coming over and squeezing us in your busy schedule. I know that you're going kind of here, there, and everywhere, talking to different people and communities, iwi groups around kind of disaster preparedness. So we are genuinely grateful and humbled to be able to share in this space with you today and have this discussion. Yeah, so I guess before we crack into some of the partai, can you tell us a bit about who you are, where you're from, and maybe perhaps some of your professional background and why you are the Yoda of disaster preparedness? Tēnā koe te papa.
Actually, the nickname that I got was because of my last name was Yoda Ojeda.
Oh, Yoda Ojeda, my apologies.
No, my people have been from the southwest part of the United States since Earth was created. So I did 31 years in the Los Angeles City Fire Department, and in that capacity, I was the trainer for the urban search and rescue portion of that. I worked with a lot of different agencies. I worked with the Marine Corps, United States Marine Corps, for 21 years. Their Chemical Biological Incident Response Force, and I could go into that later. But I was the national training group chairman for FEMA's Urban Search and Rescue Program. So I oversaw the training of the USAR assets in the United States, all of the federal assets. I did Q&A, quality assurance on courses, and went around the country. So I've been from Alaska to Florida. And I responded to every terrible kind of incidents that we had within the United States. So at the Northridge earthquake, I responded to that. And I was responded as part of the federal rescue response to the World Trade Center. And we deployed on 9/11. And I was there till 9/23 working night operations running rescue teams. We flew out military because there was nothing else in the air there. Everything else was grounded. I was at Hurricane Katrina for 19 days, Hurricane Rita, and just anything bad that happened, I generally went and ran rescue teams. So I seen, I know how the world ends, at least that's what I think I've seen. Yeah, and so how does that all relate to these different experiences that I've had? I went further on and became an instructor in weapons of mass destruction. I went to a specialized school that they have in the United States where they have live VX, live sarin gas, and all the bad stuff you can imagine. It's the only one. And you got to go into this place and find it, identify it, and contain it, and hope you don't punch a hole in your level A suit because it's bad stuff. So then I deployed to the Winter Olympics as a weapons of mass destruction team. And because after 2000, after the World Trade Center in 2002, we were worried there was going to be more response. So I've responded to just about every kind of bad thing that you can imagine. And so some of the incidents at Gabrielle that you just had are reminiscent of Katrina in a sense, but a different scale. Gabrielle came in as a level 3, category 3. Katrina came in as category 5. And that is the winds are at least 278 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
So Northridge earthquake. So the displacement of what's going to happen to people is Northridge displaced 125,000 people that lived in tents, no electricity, a whole bunch of issues. Katrina displaced 1 million. So if you took the North and South Island, put them together, Katrina would have destroyed 90% of both islands. So it's just a huge disaster area. And going in, they told us from this point on, you disaster teams, there's no fuel, there's no electricity for the next 150 miles, nothing. You're on your own. If you didn't bring it, it's not there. And in a sense, those communities had the same problems that we had as a team. They're not going to have access to any of those things for an extended period. And at the Northridge earthquake, they couldn't get into their apartments. So they don't have ID. They don't have money that's in there. And their cars were in the back of this thing. So they were out at no contact with anything, no transportation for 6 months.
Wow.
So how are you going to go to work? How are you going to go to the government and say, I need help? Well, who are you? You don't have ID. Everything is in your apartment that you can't get to for months and months and months. So a lot of issues that happen there and that's in the city where they could do that. Remote areas, it's even more difficult. So it reminds me of some of the places that I've been to that are remote. Yeah, so.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. And you've also got quite a special relationship with Aotearoa as well, being here 9 times already in your life. So you're practically an honorary tangata whenua. Can you tell us a bit about your relationship with Aotearoa?
In 1994, we had the Northridge earthquake, and my team that I was with, we did a lot of the cutting and shoring and going in and getting people out. So New Zealand recognized that you're on the same rim of fire we are. So they decided, well, we'll send the engineers and the fire department and other people that need to know what we're doing. So I was the one that showed them how we did it. And so they came across and I gave them a tour of the different buildings and how we made access through the concrete or whatever it was that we did. And so then in 95, they requested some people to come over and teach those courses. And I didn't know that it was the same people that I showed around.
Yeah.
And so when I got off the plane, I said, Des Bull, I know him, and Bruce Jones, I know these people. So when I came from the World Trade Center, I was scheduled to come here on the 28th, and when I was there till the 23rd or 24th, I came home, washed my clothes, and I got on a plane to come here. And so when you're talking to another fireman, that bond is always there because they see the same thing you see all the time. So I was asked, well, how do you deal with what you saw at the World Trade Center, 3,000 dead people? How do you deal with that? I said, well, I'm already here with my brotherhood. I'm already here with people that understand me. And then the indigenous side of that, the first place I walked into, I didn't know at the time what a hongi was. And he went, and I thought he was going to kiss me. And I said, okay, if that's the tradition. And then so it was just this immediate, because in Tarahumara language, iwigara, the breath of life, is very similar to sharing the breath of life.
Yeah.
So, okay, I understand, but you don't see that much in the States anymore because that was kind of driven out of the greetings on how you greet. So, yeah, it was just familial and felt right at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're also here during the Christchurch earthquakes as well. So your relationship has been long.
Yeah.
You've had a really long relationship with Aotearoa.
And then in 2012, they asked me to come, and I was the expert from out of the country to testify during the coroner's inquest for the Christchurch earthquake. So I was here for a month, and I read literally volumes of testimony from everybody. And then I was in the courtroom, and whenever certain questions would come up, I would talk to the counsel and say, maybe this is the question to ask or something. And so, yeah, it's a long time relationship here.
Well, that's cool. And I think thank you for sharing your kōrero around the breath of life too, because I think, there's a lot more as iwi takitaki or indigenous people that connects us more than divides us. And, like the breath of life is very much a similar experience for you guys at home as it is here. So for us to be able to connect on moments like that, I think it's quite powerful and probably translates quite beautifully into what we're talking about today and around disaster preparedness, because once you have that exchange, like you and your brothers in the fire department, we stand alongside each other through thick and thin and support each other in times of need. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's cool. Thank you. And you're also a father and a koro, so you must be missing your mokos back home.
Yeah.
Oh, too good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing a bit about who you are and your vast amounts of knowledge and experience and a real world events too, and kind of seeing, the impacts of massive events, but then the ongoing effect too, which is perhaps something we don't tend to talk about too much, and hopefully we can touch on a bit today.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, pātai tuatai. First question. What is disaster preparedness from an Indigenous perspective?
Well, it's generally it's the remoteness that they reside in. That creates a whole different problem than other people that live in Central Core. So Indigenous people, quite often, at least in the U.S., they live in reservations that are removed. And here, I've been to some maraes that are very remote. And so they're going to, the day of the earthquake here in Christchurch, there were 36 firemen on duty. And they are never going to get outside of the central core of the city because of the CTV and the PGC building collapses. They're never going to be able to have resources outside to help. So the Indigenous communities have to be self-sufficient. They have to plan ahead, and they have to look at not just Gabriel. They have to look at the Katrina, because those events are going to happen. They just haven't happened yet. There's always the plan, the backup plan, the emergency plan, and the wow plan.
Okay.
So you have to plan for all of these contingencies and they need to do that because they're remote and they will not have access to the resources that people living in the city may have.
Yeah. So I guess back with your own nations back home, were there things in your perhaps not every day, but in your world, in your people's world, that you did to prepare as best as you could that perhaps you guys still practice today?
I think COVID helped in that sense. Trying to get people vaccinated in very remote places. On some of the reservations, they don't have running water, they don't have electricity. Same things that some issues that they might have in some areas here where they don't have access to a lot of water. So the people had to work better with the government. So that's a huge difference. I mean, because there's always this battle that goes between Indigenous people, at least back in the States, and maybe to some degree here, the connection that those agencies have to have. So there's that was one of the things that still needs to be worked on, is the connection between Indigenous communities for resources during events. So,
and I guess because we are having a similar conversation here, where we're needing, where our whānau Māori, our hapu, our iwi are wanting to learn what they need to learn, have the necessary resources, and I guess determine themselves, or for ourselves, how to best prepare and respond. But how do you bridge, whose responsibility, I suppose, is it to bridge the gap between national agency and iwi whānau hapu on the ground, and to prepare and respond with all those resources and things?
Well, I talked about the National Alliance of American Indian Tribes that, and when I was talking about the National Council of American Indians, that that they got over a lot of issues they used to have, like maybe here a different iwi has problems a little bit down the road. Well, for us, Indigenous people, that they used to scalp each other 300 years ago, but they put them all on one reservation, so they intermarried. So those things changed. Those people that used to be enemies, and so here I still, from what I gathered, I could be wrong, but there was still this tribal thing sometimes, and that people have got to get past that. They have to be able to work together, because if an area is affected, and the other iwis that maybe not always got along, they may be able to help them real well. But if they don't make that connection, they don't bridge those gaps that are there historically. And then also that historically with the government, there's a lot of issues that we have, and I'm sure you have them too, that you have to get involved. And that's part of the problem. They used to call it, Indigenous people used to vote with their feet. Because if you're talking treaty, you're talking this thing, I don't like it, I just walk out. And so you can't do that. You have to be engaged. And if you're not engaged, then you won't be counted. And you're going to be left out. So it's the getting engaged. It's getting the youth, because there's certain generations that don't respond so much because of how they were. For a generation even ahead of me, the schools that they were forced to go to, the language beaten out of them. So now the younger generations have to go ahead and take over them leadership roles, and they have to be fully engaged. And it seems to be working pretty well for us.
Nice. And I guess you touched on, to that point as well, you touched on the importance of sharing resources across Indigenous groups or nations in times of events. So what are some of the barriers to doing that effectively?
Well, communications. I think that having meetings, I don't know how that's done here, but the National Council of American Indians, they meet every year, and they have 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan. What are we doing to help each other? What are we doing to organize? So I don't know on the national scale here, South Island, North Island, I don't know if there's a little rivalry or whatever, and that has to end. They have to get together, and they have to have annual meetings, and they have to go through, and they have to practice these events. I was asked to go to my children's school and look at their plan for event, and they said, they handed me this big giant book. I said, oh, it's nice. So when did you practice this? Oh, we haven't. I said, well, then you might as well throw it away, because you don't know if you can even do these things. And I said, well, how does your well, we have a radio system to contact. I said, well, how do you test that? And they turned it on. I said, okay, now what do you do? Well, the light came on. I said, no, that doesn't mean it. I said, try and contact it. They couldn't contact anybody. I said, so unless you practice this stuff continuously, and groups within the Indigenous groups are going to have to go through, and they're going to have to practice these things, and they're going to have to communicate with each other to say, okay, this is what's happening here. how could you help us, or how could we help you?
Awesome.
So, yeah.
I think that's incredible. We do have like an iwi chairs forum. That's a national forum, and I think the only rivalry between North and South is if you support the Crusaders and anyone else. So I think in terms of those relationships, minus a few, there's probably we're pretty good.
Yeah.
But I love that communication and then actually practicing it. And just on that, and I know the webinar might be running during that. We've actually got today as our national shakeout as well, where we practice our responses to an earthquake. So whānau mā, for those of you that are watching, perhaps after this we can all practice what we're talking about today and get amongst the shakeout kaupapa too. But thank you for that. And I think on your point on plan A, plan B, an emergency plan and an oh wow plan.
Yeah.
What are the differences, I suppose, between preparedness and response, and what plan fits into those kind of two categories?
Well, response is what I think your expectation of what somebody's going to be able to provide for you. But the planning part of that, it's being able to be self-sufficient and take care of yourself and your neighbor, because at that level, that's what's going to have to take place. You're not going to. Those 36 firemen never made it outside of the city when Christchurch earthquake happened, and they're not going to be able to because there's too much stuff. So you have to be self-sufficient, and it's that planning. And the difference is response is what the federal government is going to supply to you, or the local government. Well, they're not going to be able to. That's not because they don't want to. They don't have the resources to do it. So that's the difference. The response is what your expectation is, at least your expectation of what help you might get. And to me, it's always been that's not the case. Usually, and during a slide presentation I show at Northridge, this line of people that goes forever just getting water. And then a tent city, huge tent city for 125,000 people, they're displaced. They're not going to, and we're talking Los Angeles, we're talking major metropolitan city. They're not going to get that response. It's just it's slow to happen. So that's the preparedness part of that is the key to your success.
Yeah. So I guess we've got to accept and assume that we're not, the big agencies aren't always going to be able to reach us, So
yes.
We've got to be prepared as much as possible. And I liked your point around knowing your neighbor, because I think particularly with urbanization and this urban drift and whānau, and some of our big centers come from all parts of the motu. People migrate into the bigger cities or have done, and not often do we find time to meet and connect with all our neighbors. Generally speaking, we tend to become just our own and then our immediate whānau. And I like that point about, I guess, knowing your neighbor and having their back. And I know Red Cross had an initiative a couple of years back where it was connect with a mate or a whānau member who lives in a different geographical place in your town, because if you're living close to the water and there's a tsunami or some type of flooding and you've got someone on the hills, then you know that you've got a place to go in times of need, and vice versa. But that comes to, I guess, that relationship piece and knowing your neighbor. And
I think part of that was talking the other day, I said, what you need to do is you need to identify everybody in your regional neighborhood or iwi or whānau, whatever. You need to identify everybody that's a nurse, everybody that's a chippy, everybody that's an electrician, everybody that can help you on that thing. And you need to put them on a list. Everybody that has a tractor or a four-wheel drive. You need to identify those people that have medical needs, that if they're cut off, what are they going to do? They need to have somebody that can help them or reach them. Old people that can't get out. Where do they live on that remote area? And when the electricity is gone, and these people need insulin to be refrigerated, and they don't have it, who's going to help them? So all those people, all those different things need to be identified, and it needs to be at the marae or wherever you keep that information. So when something bad happens, hey, we got old people out here that can't help themselves, and we have this woman with 3 kids that can't help herself. All these different issues. We have medical issues here, and we have 2 nurses and a retired doctor, so they can set up a medical clinic here. We have somebody that has a tractor that can go out there and get to people that we can't get to because the road's washed out. So everything has to be identified, every skill that someone has, because they can all help in some way.
I think so in Aotearoa, and especially for our Māori communities, we have our iwi, most if not all have a runanga, which is essentially it varies, but generally speaking, is like the working body of the iwi, and many of our different runanga have health services, social services. They do 101 different things for their particular iwi, hapu, whānau, and community. And I'm sure that there's a real appetite for them, and because I know in discussions that I've been in as well, that they want to be that response team or that point of contact for whānau in need. But the resourcing and the training tends to get bottlenecked at the top by Crown Agency. If we can be honest now, would you encourage the breaking down of that wall and the training of our runanga or other Māori agencies to have that mātauranga to be able to respond like that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, at Christchurch, you have 36 people that are firefighters that are on duty when that happens. And amongst them are part of the USAR team. So they're never going to ever be able to respond as a USAR, Urban Search and Rescue team, that knows how to go into collapsed buildings, because they're already engaged in fires. They'll never be able to do that. So they need to be remotely, you need to we call them a community emergency response team.
Yeah.
And so they need to be developed. And you need to look to those people that are the chippies that live in your community, and they can teach other people how things. I mean, just the simple thing of a lever, a 4x post being able to lift a big part of a building just by getting a couple of them in the right place. But teaching that should be that needs to be at the community level, because there's not going to be a good response to them. So yeah, I think that's a huge thing for local iwis on us to learn that.
To learn that, Awesome. That's tangible stuff. And on that, it's a great segue to our next part. What are your top 3 tips for iwi Māori to better prepare for natural phenomena?
Generator, number 1.
Generator, right? Which I guess would definitely apply for rural communities, I suppose, and isolated communities. Yeah.
And I said just pour a 40-foot slab, put a container on it, and inside have generators, refrigerator, and a bunch of canned goods. But also you're going to need tents in that once that area is cut off, like Akaroa, when that road washes out, and it's a rainy season, they're going to need some place that they can be dry. But without a generator and no electricity, your batteries are going to run out, and you won't have communications. And without communications, you're dead in the water, because you can't tell anybody outside what resources you need. Maybe they can't help you for a while, but they got to know that you need help. So one of the things I said was that you need a generator, you need communication. So you need either a simple repeater to be able to get out, and then you need people with walkie-talkies to be able to do the recon to all those places that do your community.
Okay.
So we have that. So it's built in so that there are certain people that go do the recon for your area. And you look at those places okay, what about the school? Or we could, local school where we could have a whole bunch of people trapped. Look at those target areas first. And then as you do your sweep, to make sure those large scale things within your community are still sustainable and not, impacted heavily by the earthquake or tsunami, whichever it is.
So generator, communication are kind of 2 key things. And on that, we've got a partai from our audience, which I think complements your response quite nicely. Is it wise for whānau, hapu, iwi to train for their own search and rescue?
Absolutely. Yeah. They need to.
They're
not going to get a local response from we had in Los Angeles City and Los Angeles County, that's 7,000 firefighters. So on duty, there's usually 2,000 firefighters a day between the city and the county. That day of the Northridge earthquake, they held the off-going duty, so that's 2,000 more. We had 4,000 firefighters on duty that day. We couldn't touch it.
Wow.
We had 115 fires that started that morning. That's not the ones that started later, because there was a whole bunch that started later. 115. One of those fires burnt 480 houses to the ground.
Wow.
And we couldn't fight fire because the water mains were broken and we couldn't supply water. So I've got a picture in one of the presentations I make where a guy's one guy squirting a little bit of water on this whole neighborhood that's burning to the ground. That's one of the 115 fires we had that morning. There's too much that's going on. You're not gonna be able to handle it. I don't care how big we are. We always say how big we are with our, 4,000 firefighters that day. We couldn't even touch the, we're counting on everybody to help us around the country.
Kia ora.
Yeah, so your local people have to they need to train. Because they're not gonna get help.
And who generally provides that service? Who can our whānau reach out to, or our hapu or iwi reach out to start those conversations?
I would think locally here in the Christchurch area, it would be the urban search and rescue teams, because they're the most highly trained. And they have different level courses, Cat 1, Cat 2, Category 1, Category 2. We have something similar in the States. It's an awareness. It's in level 1, level 2. But they are the most highly trained, so they would be best to help understand the relationship. Just simple levers of a 4x4 post, what it can lift, how much a 4x4 can support if you're trying to go into something. So they have the knowledge, so that I would say that that would be the request that I would make, and they come out, and I'm sure they'd be more than happy to go out. I'm speaking for them now.
That's all right. They'll agree. I'm sure they'll agree.
Yeah, because I'm going to go back to the States and I won't know all the arguments that happen. So, I think they would be willing to go out there and train people that how to respond, how to do a search recon. And because you need to want to search the same area 3 times, you want to go ahead and do it one time and grid it off and make sure that everything is done appropriately. So the GPS for you, so you come back and you punch into your computer, this area is searched, it's done.
I think that'll be awesome. And I know that, we're probably resourcing is always a bit of an issue when discussions like that happen, as much as there might be good intent by us at the urban search and rescue teams.
Yes.
To want to do that. So we need government agencies to kind of come to the table here and support those types of initiatives, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that's a point that we've spoken to a bit earlier too. Another partai from our audience, and I kind of like how we're doing this, if that's all right with you. We'll just keep having a kōrero, and then as you guys have questions, we'll just respond. So, I've got the questions coming through here. So please put those through and we'll get to those kind of as we go through our questions. Another one here is, in recent disasters, there's been tension with civil defence and runanga. So those are our Māori iwi agencies. Runanga and other agencies too, in responding and commandeering of resources. How can we stop that tension?
Wow. I think it's just a coordination between the agencies, between them. Everybody has to know their role, and they have to commandeering things. I understand that. We commandeered a bunch of things at Katrina because we had no choice, because everything was flooded, and the resources were flooded. There was a parking lot with 150 buses. Nobody moved in the low-lying area, so there went your transportation because they're all flooded. So I think that the agencies that have and the agencies that don't have to coordinate. So the iwis that don't have resources, instead of commandeering, they need to say what need to plan ahead, what their needs might be. If it's a tsunami and where you are, what are the resources you might need? And so then you then need to talk with the civil defense and what they could provide, possibly without naturally commandeering something.
Yeah.
And worst case scenarios in Katrina, we requisitioned many things that were not given to us, but we didn't have a choice. So we have to go to the bathroom, we have to take a shower, we had to eat, and they couldn't catch up to us in time for a whole lot of that.
Yeah, so we're kind of in a unique political landscape in Aotearoa at the moment, where the ideas of roles and power we're not on the same page.
Yeah.
Let's just put it like that, eh? And our iwi hapu very much stand within their own rangatiratanga, and they rightly should, but we've also got national crown agencies who think when things hit the fan, that they're the ones who have the responsibility or the power to use resource and respond. And I guess until those conversations happen at a high level, from what I can gather from what you're saying, is that runanga or whānau or hapu or different agencies need to just walk through the front door and have an honest conversation with their kind of emergency management services and how to better respond and have a relationship. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. They're gonna, like you said, they gotta walk through the front door, because you don't want to find out on the day of that you can't or
Yeah.
they won't. You need to find this all out, and if they can't or they won't, you need to find that out.
Mm.
And then you need to plan all those different plans for how you're going to help your people. If they can't or they won't supply the resources that you need, that your people need, then you're gonna have to do it on your own. And you need to find out ahead of time what they think they'll be capable of. There's NOAA, which is our agency for atmospheric and all that kind of stuff. They have a computerized plan of if it's a level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 category hurricane, how far inland is that going to go? You know, or what is the how much is the tide going to rise? How much is that? All these different issues. So you have a similar agency here, and so they need to be at the table. So you know, if it's a level 4 category, what's that going to do to our infrastructure? How far will it come inland? And your geologists too. So they all need to be at the table when you do this talking, because they're going to be able to tell you how bad it can be. And then you need the agencies that have the ability to give support.
Yeah.
Well, what can we do? Well, if you're like they left them 150 buses in that low level plane, they aren't gonna be able to do anything. So their planning needs to be, what do we do in that our contingencies for if the water's going to come into this level? We need to put our buses somewhere else, and then we can help people.
Yeah.
So all those people need to get together, and they need to hash out what they can supply in this level of emergency.
Cool.
And what to expect and what you're probably not going to get, and the reality of what you're probably not going to get.
Yeah. I think what was really reflecting now on COVID, and more recently in Cyclone Gabrielle, like our whānau Māori and our Māori agencies like that and responded within hours, if not overnight, of the initial kind of impact of COVID and Gabrielle, and we're really good through that. Just through that relationship and how we and our core values of manaakitanga, we can respond in a way that keeps the people and their care and their well-being at the center of whatever our response may be. And to that, I think our Crown agencies can learn a lot from that approach when they're doing their planning and they're responding too. But I like that point on, it's about that relationships, I suppose, and our whānau going to kind of taking that initiative and starting those conversations with emergency management services and what they can do. And I think to that point, bringing it back to our whānau now, what are kind of 3 easy things at a family level, at home, sitting down having a cup of tea with my partner and my tamariki, that we can do to better prepare ourselves? What can we do at home?
You need to have a go cache.
What's a go cache?
We're out the door and we're gone.
Okay.
Let's go. A cache of, you need to have a supply of medicine. I take medicine that I have to take all the time. And if I don't, if my house collapsed and I didn't have my go cache outside of my house in my car, then I'm going to be out of medicine. And if you're remote and there's no pharmacy, or I'm not sure if there are pharmacies here called pharmacies, but if there are no pharmacies close to you, you're not going to get any medicine. So what's that going to do to you? And what's it going to do to your neighbor? How can you help them? So that all that stuff has to be in a to-go cache.
Yeah.
And you have water, you need to have some canned goods, some stuff that you need to sustain yourself, but you also need stuff for the environment that you're going to be in. In Los Angeles, one day it got below 65. I can't remember, but it was an ancient history. Our temperature is between 65 and 85 all the time. We get 10 days of rain a year, and that's it. So it's a different environment. When here you have a lot more rainy days. So what are you going to do? What are you going to have in your cache that's going to support me and my kids for some time till I think there'll be other resources to help me? So you need a to-go cache in the trunk of your car or somewhere that's not in your house, where when it collapses,
okay.
You can be able
to. I was going to chuck it in the cupboard with the vacuum, but no, you reckon put it in your waka?
Yeah.
Okay.
So something that that you can survive with. And maybe you have 2 weeks supply of medicine, but within 2 weeks, you might be able to get some help from, somewhere that you can do it.
Yeah.
But you need to have, I typically have about a 2-month supply, even though I probably won't need that in Los Angeles, but I have it. I don't know when the next Northridge earthquake or the next World Trade Center type event is going to happen, but I'm well prepared for it. I got a 55-gallon drum of water in my garage. Just all those different things that I have. I have a different to-go pack because I'm part of the local team in my neighborhood that takes care of our neighborhood. So I have my little vest that tells me I'm part of that team, and a radio, and all those different little things that I need to support my little local neighborhood.
Oh, cool. And so is that a to-go bag per person in the house? Or is that just one big to-go?
It depends on how many people in your house.
Yeah.
So in some houses that can be a very big bag.
Kia ora.
But you make sure that you got enough diapers. What are you gonna do with your kids when you don't have diapers? And we go back to the old days where they used to all be cloth, and you washed them and dried them out all the time. But all those little things for the little ones, you got to have all that stuff prepared.
So I guess some of the to recap on that, because I think that's quite an awesome point, is a bag per person, depending on the size of the whānau, medication if you need it. Kai for a few days, maybe a week, depending. I guess does that intensify or magnify if you are in an isolated community? Because we saw with Cyclone Gabriel, with the East Coast, roads were just swept away, and whānau, like in Whareponga, we're just cut off, completely cut off. Granted, I think, anyway, is that kind of go bag or that situation?
Well, I think that now I'm going to speak for something that I don't know anything about, but I would say that my go bag would be good for a week. But at that point, I would think that my iwi at the marae, if they prepared well, could help support my family. So I could do it for myself for a week, but locally, my community, however it is, marae, iwi, whatever it is, that we have planned well enough to help us, our group, our tribe. So I can have enough to support myself and my family, but we need a bigger plan for the community. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And then another question here from the audience. Fuel is a big issue in New Zealand, especially in a major disaster. So alternatives to generators need to be sought if you can't store the fuel for them if the event is long term. Do you have any knowledge of alternatives?
Yeah, I have a solar system at my house.
Okay.
I have 20 panels. And so I have a backup system, and I have a 10 kilowatt generator. So whichever is functioning at the time, I can plug the 10 kilowatt generator and power my house and the refrigerators. It's got 18 hours worth of runtime before I need to fill it up. Or I got 20 solar panels. So I would think that on the marae or somewhere, one of those houses that they have, either you have wind or solar power. One of the two that charge your batteries.
Would you suggest, and just off the top of my head, I think solar, some of those alternative energy sources are probably quite expensive for whānau to set up. Would you then suggest perhaps a system like that being set up at a local base, whatever that may look like, whether it's the marae, whether it's the community centre, or whatever it is for wherever you are, investing in a setup like that so people can come to that rather than trying to set out for themselves?
Well, so whatever resources they have, whether it's the wind, whether it's solar, whether it's a generator, whatever the plan A is, they got to have another one to back that thing up. So if the problem is they don't think they have that much fuel, I'm going to take somebody's car, park it right there, and siphon out their gas and use the gas. So you got to have all those contingency plans. So solar and wind is a great way to go. And I think, I'm not sure, but I'm thinking that here that the wind is less expensive, because I can buy for $300, I can buy a wind turbine for my house.
Okay.
So and then just buy a couple batteries and then power stuff off that 12-volt inverter.
Cool. I think one of the most amazing superpowers for Māori is our ability to be tutu And so perhaps by exploring some alternative options and getting creative with ways around some of these difficult things like gas and stuff, we might be able to come up with some pretty cool ways to create power outside of fueling. Yeah, just have to get our thinking caps on e te whānau. Our next partai here is, so what does it look like when an emergency response unfolds? And I guess an additional part to that question is, how do we ensure that Māori are at the decision-making table when things get serious?
What they have to do is they got to walk through the door.
Mm.
They've got to go in. Nobody's going to hand them something. They're going to have to go in and be part of the conversation, and they've got to demand that they're part of the conversation. It's I think it's the same with Indigenous people everywhere, that the government's, you're way down on the list. So unless you've got somebody that's going to speak up, unless you're going to speak up and speak for yourselves, no one's going to hear it.
Mm.
So you're going to have to go through, you're going to have to walk that door. There's an old saying that first you knock on the door, then then if that doesn't work, eventually you kick the door in and you get into the conversation. So however that needs to be done, it needs to happen, and it needs to happen not the day of the event. It needs to happen well before. You need to be knocking on that door now. If they don't respond, knock again. If not, then you kick the door in and you say, look, we need to be part of this conversation because we're going to be affected, and you're not going to be able to help us unless you know what we need.
Sure.
So somebody's got to, that's why I say the younger generation coming up, I'm that old guy, so now the younger generation, and I was really impressed when I was at the marae the other day that the speaker, I can't think of his name, Manu, but he did a great job, and his little daughter was there. He goes, I'm training her to be the next generation.
Sure.
And that resonated with me. I said, that's what needs to happen. They have to be able to, you have to raise them to be advocates for themselves and advocate for your people and knock on that door.
Yeah. Oh, we love knocking, e te iwi, o ke reira te wero i ngā rangatira kei te whare pāremata. Get to knocking, that's for sure. Kia ora.
Well, kick it in.
We'll kick it in.
Yeah, they're not listening, you got to kick it in.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, I guess another partai is outside of kind of the conventional system and, the Crown agencies that tend to monopolize the space. Where else can our iwi Māori go for that support, for training, for, I guess, are there other iwi taketake or Indigenous people or your own that you've connected with over your years who are doing mahi in this space? And if so, kind of how have they responded as Indigenous communities to disasters?
Oh, the Indigenous communities are so different. They're spread out from desert people to mountain people to, it's just, there's this, the differences are tremendous. And there's not like here, there's a language. In California, I can remember, just in California, I can remember there's hundreds of languages, hundreds. And there's different as French to Chinese. So it's a whole different issue. I mean, when you can't speak the same language. So very different. So can you rephrase that again so I can hit it again a little better?
I guess I guess what I was thinking in my mind was that, is there value? I know that we touched on the fact that our communities or our hapu or iwi need to start learning how to be their own search and rescuers.
Yes.
And learning the mātauranga associated to that kind of world or that response. Whether it be at a national level or not, do we need to set up our own independent agency to cater to us? Or is it possible to fit within the current system, I suppose?
I would say to try and fit within the current system, because they may be able to offer lots of things that you don't have access to. But if they don't, then you need to do it for yourselves. You need to set up your own to take care of your stuff, because if they're not going to be able to do it, no one else is going to be able to do it. You have to do it for yourself. That's the bottom line. I don't, in a sense, I don't care what they say they can offer. I know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to take care of my people. That's number one thing. I take care of my people. So if you need to set up through your iwis, hapus, if you need to set up that coordination, then that needs to happen. And the sooner you get to it, because we don't know if it's today or tomorrow, the next day that it's going to happen. So you need to do it. Like I said, I'm kicking in the door. If you're not listening, then we're doing it ourselves, but we're going to take care of our people, number one. So that needs to happen. You guys need to jump on that.
Kia ora, kia ora. Thank you for that. And I think, yeah, that's incredible. We've got, I'm not too sure if you know much about El Nino summers, but we've got one of those coming our way.
Oh, El Nino.
El Nino summers.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry for my pronunciation. We've got one of those expected to hit, and my little understanding of that is that it's going to be a hot, dry, windy summer.
Yeah.
What can our whānau, I guess, do in that instance to prepare for, I guess, the impending summer?
I would say that's different for us. Ours is going to be a wet summer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We kind of had that last summer.
Yeah, so we're on the opposite side.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to get a wet one. And our dams are at full capacity right now. So that's a whole different set of planning. But we have brush fires. I mean, we're famous for our brush fires. But I think communities that are especially isolated need to plan for those kinds of dry fire conditions.
Fire conditions, all right.
One road in, one road out. How are you going to take care of your people? So we have fire breaks, we call them. There's just areas where there was a place at a city called Paradise that burnt to the ground, but they had one area in the center of town where everybody could go there were no trees there and for that specific purpose. So just the planning of knowing where to go, where not to go. And for us, lots of times it's terrible because everybody's trying to get out and we can't get in to fight fire because all the roads are blocked. So have that planned out, if there's one road in, one road out, that can just create havoc. So need to plan where will we go when something happens. Like if it's the marae, or maybe not the marae because it's in the middle of the forest where those dry conditions are going to be. But once again, it's all back to pre-planning.
Yeah. So are there signs that our people can look out for in summer that might lead to, because I guess bushfires or wildfires and could occur, I guess, say under an El Nino summer. Are there things that we could look out for that could indicate some kind of impending fire?
The humidity.
Oh.
Yeah, so the lower the humidity, we have what we call red flag days, which means that's a whole bunch of things happen. But it means a lot of people are pre-deployed and they're pre-deployed in the hills. And so as the humidity drops and the temperature goes up, anything, an old Coke bottle sitting there that hits the ground the right way can start a fire.
Okay.
So, we have indicators, and that we have a whole different levels of how bad the category is. Then the red flag is the worst. So that means my station might be pre-deployed in the mountains, and certain things are established. There's absolutely no, they put the no fires, no campgrounds, all those things are closed off and you can't even go into them sometimes. So there's just a bunch of things that take place. So depending on how you establish what different humidity levels might mean to you when you get into the very low digits, what that means, what do you stop doing? And then the radios go on in those remote areas. That everybody is talking about. Okay, we're now at this level. No outside fires, even if it's your house and you're burning in your fireplace. Just a whole bunch of things that happen at those different levels.
Yeah, I guess that's quite prominent, especially in like high dense populated areas. If you've got an outdoor fire pit and you're roasting marshmallows or something, to really be conscious and not do that.
No, you won't be doing that.
Yeah, common sense saying everyone should be taking their rubbish if they're going for hikes in our maunga and our bushes, te whānau. Take your rubbish with you so anything's not catching anything alive. What we're going to do now is we are going to break just for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Grab a water, have a bit of a stretch, let our whānau refill their cup of teas. We'll come back and we've got a fair few questions flooding in too, so we'll continue our conversation then, eh?
Okay.
Okay, we'll see you in 5 minutes, te whānau. Tia mauri ora. Kia ora, everybody. Hope you've had a chance to stretch your legs, haere te wharepaku, grab your cup of tea. We're going to kind of head. We're on the home stretch now, really. We've got some awesome questions coming through. If you aren't having a look at those, feel free to do so, because there's also people offering some advice and some of their own mātauranga and their gems too, which is great. So we're going to kick things off and try and answer as many questions as we can.
Okay.
Kind of the ones that really haven't already spoken to between now and 11:30, which is roughly 25 minutes or so away. So our first pātai, first of all, is a mihi. So thank you for your fascinating insights. What advice do you have for first responders on how to look after their own well-being while dealing with terrible events like the ones you have experienced? Good pātai.
If they're talking about the mental aspect of that,
Yeah, I think so.
it's different for everybody how they process those things. For us, when we came back from World Trade Center, we have a psychologist that everybody has to, we sit around and we talk, and then they visit with you. So I'm trying to put this in the nicest way, but I was very close with my friends that we taught all over the country and different countries. And so I knew their wives real well. And after several months, one of the wives called me and said, "We're having problems. We used to be very regular sex 3 times a week. And now we haven't, since you've been back for months and months." And then the other wife called me and told me, he yells at the kids. He's short with me. And our department had sent out questionnaires to the guys on the team. And the guys all said, "Nothing's wrong with me. I'm a man." And so I went to the team psychiatrist and psychologist, and I said, "You sent the questionnaires to the wrong people. Send them to the wives." And they did, and they got a whole different story. So they started a different process for that, on how we come back and try that critical incident stress management portion of that. And it's different for everybody. Some people need more or want more. For me, it's different. I put that in a box and it goes somewhere else, because you can't go to those things where there's 3,000 people dead and you just can't go to there and sometimes process that. So everybody's different. That some people want to be with the psychologist. Some people, for us, it was talking with your firefighter friends that experience the same thing. And so you're talking to a group. So if it happens to you, if this experience happens to you, then talk it out with those people that were there that understand, because a lot of people won't understand what you're talking about or why you felt a certain way when you saw something. In one incident, when I backed out because I got involved, when you get involved emotionally, you're done. And I was at an accident where a kid got wrapped around an axle. And when I first walked up to it, I thought it was my nephew, my godson. And I told the guys, "You've got this. I'm out. I've lost it. I can't do this." Even after I realized that it wasn't my nephew. So, and then I talked with the guys that were there, and I told them what happened. I said, "I thought that was my nephew. I couldn't do it." And so those people that are there understand what you just went through. So that's the people to talk to, I think, for me.
Yeah.
Now, maybe different, and you made me need that critical incident, and your whānau or large organization should have a critical incident stress management process for you.
Well, say that again.
Critical incident stress management.
Okay.
So CISM, we call it. So, and it's somebody that, in your group, your whānau, the larger group, there is a psychologist or something, and then they can help everybody that has those issues. Some may not, some will. It just depends. But talking through it after every event, we sit down and we talk. Everybody talks about everything they did, what they could have done better. and it gets out. It's kind of a relief, you know. Okay, I talked about why I feel like, you know, I saw this, and boy, that was hard for me. So talking about it is a key factor, I think.
Kia ora, kia ora. There's a few gems from me from what you said there. One, it's okay to not actually be okay, because
Yeah.
we're all human.
Yep.
And we experience, perceive, and take on extreme events very differently, I suppose. And for us as Māori, I know karakia is a way that we protect, nurture, care for ourselves and those that are around us. So we often, whether it's in different scenarios, will pre and post an event, we'll do karakia, sometimes by the moana or by the awa, and we allow what we're feeling to be carried and washed away.
Yeah.
Or we allow the protection of our atua to kind of as a korowai, as a cloak of protection before we go into different events and stuff like that as well. So I guess for our first responders in terms of well-being is it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
Find out what works for you, whether it's the clinician, the psychologist, or the thing, or look to your own Indigenous knowledge systems perhaps for ways that can help look after or protect or enhance your well-being.
Yeah, and then a lot of Indigenous tribes, depending on tribe, because there's so many of them in the country. After you've been around death, there's ceremonies that you do
Yes.
to cleanse yourself.
Yeah.
So that that may be part of your process too. If you have Indigenous ceremonies that kind of cleanse the spirit in a sense.
Feel that. That's awesome. Another part I hear, I guess similar to what we've just touched on, is for you personally. How does your Indigenous knowledge system inform disaster awareness and reduction?
Well, as we talked about, most of they don't know, but there's this line they drew and they called it a border. And so tribes on this side are Native Americans, and on that tribe you're Mexican. So it depends on what side of the border you were raised on. And mine were on the other side of the border, not the United States border for most part. So there's really not the infrastructure to help or do anything for Indigenous people so much on that side of the border as opposed to the U.S. side of the border. So could you say it again so I can make sure I hit it?
So how do you use your own Indigenous knowledge systems to respond or bring awareness to disaster preparedness or reduction?
Once again, it's kind of on what side of the border you're on.
Yeah.
And on the U.S. side, they're much better at it. They do have localized teams within some of the tribes have set up localized capabilities that do not, because they're so remote from any help. Navajo Reservation is gigantic. It's millions and millions of acres. So you can live very remotely. So they have to do more on their own and not depend on anything from the government. They generally don't, because there's really not much help from them. But so they have to fend for themselves individually. And on the East Coast, different areas of the country, it's very different on how they work with the government to prepare for anything.
Yeah. I guess similarly to here, and in a real basic way of explaining it is that for Māori, we have kind of three key relationships. One being with atua, which is the environments and the different landscapes, and from the winds to the sea to the forests, and then we have relationship with whenua, which is kind of the geographical place that we sit and reside in, and then with tangata, so the interpersonal relationships. And from what I can gather from what you're saying, in terms of Indigenous knowledge systems, it's about understanding your place within those three. I guess for us as Māori, it's about understanding your place within those three spaces and how your environment works and how your geographical space responds to disaster events or environmental events, and then checking up on your peeps and making sure who's got the right skills and mātauranga to do different things, but also if everyone's okay and looking after your neighbor and things like that we've already touched on. So that relationship piece for me,
Yeah, I know in one of the talks the question was about people coming over sacred land and trying to help it. But the same thing with us. I mean, you can't cross over certain parts. It's just it's Mother Earth, and you just can't do that kind of stuff. So I told her that they need to pre-plan where if those areas are, if they're going to work with the civil defense, because she said civil defense came in and they messed up,
straight over.
They drove straight over. So, and it was amazing the similarities between when we went to the cemetery, we washed our hands, and then I said, that's the same thing we do with smoke.
Yeah.
So they're the same ceremonies. I was just amazed. It was basically the same thing, but the same issues about going over sacred ground. You have to establish them first, draw your maps out, and give them to civil defense, and so they know coming in.
Yeah, kia ora.
So I told her that was the thing to do, because certain tribes have done that. And in Wounded Knee is an area that's sacred because of the massacre that was there. Federal soldiers went over where they shouldn't be going anyway, but so that has to be planned out ahead so they know not to be disturbing this or.
Kia ora.
Yeah.
No, that's incredible. That's awesome. Our next partai here is, thank you, first of all, from the audience members, thank you so much for your advice. Is the first responder community interested in using cargo drones to deliver emergency supplies?
Well, that would be a great way to do, because I have a drone. But that's a great way to send medical, and depending on the size of your drone, that matter of fact, in the US, they're sending stuff now. They're deliveries by drone. So if you have the drone capacity, that'd be a good way to send things. But I don't know what your range is beyond. We have BVLOS, beyond visual sight, basically. So I don't know what your regulations are here for drones, but it'd be a good way to get things that you need.
Yeah. So definitely something worth exploring. And
absolutely, yeah. And if you've got somebody our departments are going to now, they're using them all the time now for fires, because they can't get people back there. They send up a drone and say, okay, well, 2 valleys over, that's where we need to get. And so they're doing that a lot now. Yeah.
Oh, I think that's a really great idea, because I know in a lot of some of our isolated communities up the coast and things, helicopters tend to be the way to go to check that stuff out. But perhaps it's about training up, whether it's a rangatahi or whoever, to be the drone flyer extraordinaire for the runanga.
Yeah,
right.
And absolutely
surveys the land and delivers essential services and things.
And they can go out and take a quick bird's eye view of everything and say, okay, well, we're not as bad as we thought here, but we really need to work on this area over here and send help there.
Yeah. Use technology to our advantage. Kia ora. He pātai tēnei no ngā uri o Taranaki. So this is a question that's come through from someone from the Taranaki area, where one of our korora, our maunga. It's a bit of a lengthy one, so I'll try and read it as slowly as I can. One of the challenges for us in actually getting our whānau on the waka, I guess all on board, to understand the potential seriousness of natural disasters and risks. This can be due to a range of our reasons, including the intimate relationship we have with our mountains, rivers, etc., and not having memory of an eruption or a flood. What advice would you have for us to better support our whānau to take heed of the warning signs, or the tohu, and taking these signs seriously so they can be prepared, planned, and informed?
Well, it's like us in Los Angeles. Every 40 years, so we have an earthquake. And so if you were born after that earthquake, you don't have any experience with it. So till the day it happens, then you have experience with it. So that doesn't mean you don't plan those things. You don't plan for those events. You don't plan for that volcano, which is there in Taranaki, to go. Like Ruapehu, when I came here, 95, had a big eruption, and we were right there working. So they are going to happen. You can't, unless you think you're very lucky you might as well go to a casino. because they are going to happen, and you need
Kia
to
ora.
you just need to prepare for them.
Yeah,
It's like I said, it's not on the day of that you find that you cannot respond and you can't help your people.
kia ora.
It's just planning. It's just you have to do it. And the big thing was exercising your plans.
Yeah.
You have to do that continuously. It's got to be quarterly or whatever, and you give yourself more problems. Typically, when I teach a class, it's a disaster class for managers and responders. We give them a whole set of problems, and then right in the middle of that, we give them what we call an inject. That bridge is not that you were using is no longer there.
Mm.
And then when they start making plans to go do this, that's no longer there. When we went to Katrina, we had 3 different vehicles and they all took a different route. Because when this road ended, they came back and radioed that
Yeah.
road doesn't work. And then we moved that person out to another road and we kept going. And then these 2 roads are flooded and we just kept going, and you have to plan for everything that's going to go wrong. The maps show the roads go through, but they don't show the flood. So you don't know what's flooded and what's not to get to someplace. So we just kept doing that the whole way for 150, 200 miles. We were just, blocked again. Giant trees that fell across and were ripped out of the ground. Okay, what do? We go, well, they said there's got a clear path here. So you just have to keep preparing, and you have to practice and practice and practice. I can't, that's
incredible. I think it comes down to whakapapa, like the event might not happen in your lifetime, but it likely could happen in your kids or your mokopuna and their kids and so on. So it's about understanding that our responsibility now also, we're also responsible for the well-being of the generations to come. And it's a bit cheesy, but that's the case for our uri, for our mokopuna, for our kids. So we've got to prepare now for their sake.
Well, there's a saying, an indigenous saying, that whatever you do now, you have to plan for how that's going to affect 7 generations. So it's called the 7th generation. So if I do something, then it has to be able to affect them 7 generations from now.
Kia ora.
Yeah.
Kia ora.
So that planning is maybe not for me.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not for my grandson, but it's for somewhere further down to the 7th generation.
I guess how do we? Oh, that's beautiful. Like my mind's blowing right now. How do we bring our whānau along that journey when, for many of our families, putting food on the table and making sure that the lights are on and the bills are paid is really the primary responsibility, is what they care about right now. Like they can't look too far ahead. How do we bring our whānau along in an empowering way that doesn't make them feel like crap because they haven't thought or considered this right now?
Well, because they don't have the money or the means to provide beyond that. So I think that once again, it comes back to community. It comes back to your iwi. It comes back to, I know that they don't have, so I can help. Typically, there were different tribes, but basically same as this, called potlatch. And that is the richest man in the tribe was the man that could give the most away. So he's actually the poorest because he gave everything away. So that's how you look after each other.
Cool.
They don't have, and I know they don't have, they've got 4 kids and they're struggling to put some things on the table. So I can help do this. I can help set up at the marae or whatever. I can put more food there for them because it's more than enough for me, but I can put more canned goods there. I can do these things that can help somebody that doesn't have the resources now. It is always about the local community taking care of themselves, no matter what.
Oh, that's powerful. I mean, that's very much how we think as Māori, and what manaakitanga is centered upon. It's about my role in ensuring your well-being, and then by me doing that, there's this natural reciprocation of then by me doing that for you, you're then in turn doing that for me where you can. It's not about giving everything over if you've got nothing to give, but it's about giving, like what you're saying, giving what you can because you can, when you can, for the betterment of everybody, not just kind of your own. And I think that's powerful. That's some powerful stuff. A random side question that you may not know the answer to, and I certainly don't expect you to, but I've thought about this since I was a kid, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one thinking this. Why are all our significant hurricanes and stuff named after women?
Well, I think that's changing now.
Is
I
it?
think, yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
good,
yeah,
good, good.
yeah. They decided that
Yeah.
that wasn't
Yeah.
wasn't exactly the right way to do things.
Because I may or may not have a sister whose name is Gabrielle.
Yeah,
And she was a bit gutted that her name was Gabrielle and that was the name of the event.
Yeah, well, we had
recently.
Hurricane Ike. So we've had, in the States, we've had names with it after fellas now. Yeah.
Nice. A bit more of a balance there.
Yeah.
Heoi, ko tai wā tātou, ki te mutunga o tō tātou wānanga I tēnei rā. Ka tika he mihi nui tēnei ki a koe e te pāpā. Mō o kōrero, mō tō mātauranga kua whāriki hia I tēnei ata. Hei kai kei ngā ringa o tātou e noho e wānanga ana I tēnei rā. Man, ko rangatira nui tātou I a koe I tēnei rā. We're coming to the end of our time today, and I really cannot stress enough how thankful we are to have you in this space and to be able to share with you, to learn from you, to listen to your amazing kōrero and your valuable insights. Just so humbled and grateful to be able to share this space and sit across the table from you and just glean off all your amazing mātauranga, your amazing knowledge. And no doubt that we've all taken something away from the webinar today that we can implement at home with whānau, in our workplace and kind of beyond to the point where we've got this interconnected relationship across the motu where we're eventually all looking out for each other and supporting each other in times of need. So to you, Papa, thank you so much for making the time today and sharing with us your amazing your mātauranga. It's been awesome. It's been awesome. I could talk for ages just listening to your story. So thank you so much. And thank you for all of those who responded and registered on such short notice. I know we only put this out last week. So for those of you that registered and for those of you that attended online today, thank you so much for being here. I know that we answered most of the questions in some way, shape or form. For those of you that for the questions that we may have missed, sorry, we will try and respond to you via email, and you will all get a recording of this sent to your email as well. So don't freak out and feel like you had to write on a whole essay just to try and write down the knowledge that was passed down, because you would have written an entire thesis with the amazing mātauranga that our Papa shared today. So thank you to you all, and again, thank you to you. Do you have any?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that all response has to be local. It has to start local because that's the world you're going to live in. It has to be local capability. And I cannot stress that enough. Local capability and kick the door in to get into the conversation.
Kia ora. That's a way to finish.
Yeah.
Kia ora, tēnā koe. O tira, kia tārewa tūnga ki te kōrero ki te rangi, ko ia tēnei te whakawātea ki nei tūturu whakamaua kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Tēnā koutou katoa.